Hello, everyone. Welcome to Love That Lasts, the relationship podcast sponsored by the ACU Faulkner Center for Marriage and Family. On today's episode, Signs You Might Be in a Toxic Relationship, I'm going to be visiting with Dr. John Delony. John is a three-time best-selling author, mental health expert, and host of the Dr. John Delony Show. John has two PhDs and over 2 decades of experience in counseling, crisis response, and higher education. While at Ramsey Solutions, he has authored best-selling books, Own Your Past, Change Your Future, Redefining Anxiety, and most recently, Building a Non-Anxious Life. John has appeared on Good Morning America, Fox News, and Fox Business, and has been featured in Real Simple Magazine, Fast Company, The Today Show, and HuffPost. John's goal is to help people navigate some tough decisions in life, improve their relationships, and believe they're worth being well. So welcome, John. Thank you so much for sitting down with me on today's episode of Love That Lasts. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, the most important thing that didn't make it into that bio is like you've been my friend for like 20 years, man. That's awesome.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to mention that to give our listeners a little context because my husband Jason and I go back with you and your sweet wife Sheila quite a few years. Absolutely. And it was such a pleasure being able to think back of how our relationship started, some early days at Abilene Christian University. But one of the things that really sticks out in my mind, and we were chatting about this earlier, is that many years ago, when my now almost 22-year-old son played tennis. We visited you guys in Lubbock and actually, I think, stayed with you. And I can't believe now that kid is almost 22 years old. So here we are, John.
That is wild to me. I can't even wrap my head around it.
I know there's moments I can't either, but this is how life happens. And just wait. You will
I
see
don't
that
like it.
with your kids as well. Absolutely.
My
But
son
young,
came
young at
down.
heart.
Well, my son came downstairs the other day wearing he was wearing all my clothes. And I thought that's not supposed to be like that. And then I thought that's kind of awesome. And then I thought like, hey, that's my shirt. I want that back. Anyway, it happens so fast. It's wild, man.
Okay, so here's the thing, because I live in a house with boys, I mean, two now are more grown in college, but I don't have to worry about sharing my clothes. So there is something cool about being the only girl in the house for
That's
sure.
fair. That's
Well, anyway, it's great to catch up today, John. I'm looking forward to being able to have this conversation with you today. Let's give our audience just a little bit of context about you, because you have been working for several years now as a writer and professional within mental health and relationship life. Tell us what really got you interested in this line of work.
I mean, my career started, I was a high school teacher, and then I moved into working at universities, and I spent pretty much 20 years, 2 decades doing that. And then in the evenings, I would always partner with the police departments to go do really tough stuff, like doing death notifications and sitting with people in their worst moments. And while I was doing that there at Texas Tech, I got a second PhD in counseling. I found myself over my head working with students and inevitably working with their families and their parents. And often I would work with a student and then their parents would call and say, hey, could we talk to you for a little while about what's going on in our home? And so that's really just been the natural evolution of my job is trying to figure out as the lives of our students have changed, I needed to get some more skills. And then in 2018, I had a weird, fortuitous. I was speaking to a large group of students and their families. I thought it was going to be a room of 100. It ended up being a room of 1,000. And
Wow.
um, Dave Ramsey's executive vice president was sitting in the audience dropping her daughter off, and she said, "I'm going to hire that guy." And now, as my son says, "Dad, you're just a dumb YouTuber," and so that's what I do now. It was
Our
my
our
wife.
kids can humble us for sure, can't they?
Oh, dude, I try to tell him, I was like, dude, I used to be so important. He's like, Dad, you're just a YouTuber now. But you know my wife, you can imagine the conversation when I said, hey, what if I left Belmont at our dream job, our dream setup, and I started a podcast? And she was like, I don't think that's a great idea. But it's worked out. So we're doing great.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, and let's talk a little bit about kind of this niche that you have been really pursuing as you're helping people within relationship life. You also have this new book coming out this fall, Building the Marriage You Want. Can you give us a little taste of what this book is about?
Yeah, I mean, it was really sparked from a conversation in a signing line of all places in Los Angeles, California. I was signing the anxiety book. I was doing a book tour out there, and really quick, while I was signing the book and taking photos, a woman leaned in and said, "Hey, real quick, is marriage still worth it?" And
Mm,
I looked at her and said, "What do you mean?" She said, "In the current day and age, is it still worth it?" And I started immediately down this automated response of, well, me and my wife, and she interrupted me and she said, no, 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 I know it worked out for you. Is it still worth it? And I looked at her and it kind of broke that little facade I had. And I was like, I don't have a great answer. Like, I don't know the data. I don't know. I can give you a Sunday school answer, but that's not, you know what I mean? And so she quickly passed. And you've known me a long time. I tend to obsess over a single question and I end up getting another degree or following it to the end of time. But that question haunted me. And that led to, if it is still worth it, how do you do it now? Because we're trying to do
right.
marriage in a way that we're asking things of marriage that have never been asked before of this thing called marriage in human history. How are we supposed to do this? And so I just got haunted by the question and went down a rabbit hole for a few years and emerged believing not only in marriage, this idea, and I don't want to sound caustic. You know me well. I tend to be like, it's all coming down. I think the future of us as people rests on not on the big institutions that we're watching fall down around us, but on two people saying I do, ride or die. Because I think this thing will be, our culture will be reborn from homes and neighborhoods and small
Right.
communities, and we'll rebuild that way. So not only do I think marriage matters now, I think it's the only shot we have left.
Yeah, I love your perspective there. Absolutely. Because, what's happening within our homes, our families, our marriages is shaping society. So,
Yeah.
case in
Yeah.
point. And I want to say, I just love the fact, related to kind of your professional life, that you are trying to produce content that is meeting people where there is a need. So, even this lady coming to you and kind of asking you that question, and while it stuck with you and gnawed at you, it really is trying to help people get answers, get information, content that is relative to their lives. So well done, my friend. I
Well,
love
I
that.
appreciate it. For us as scholars, I'll tell you this, the biggest dose of humble pie I've received over the last 5 years, stepping away from being a university nerd for a long time, for most of my adult life, um, it was the YouTube analytics guys who sat me down about 6 months, maybe 9 months into doing this new show. I was so desperate for people to think I was smart and to show them I can take apart OCD and the neurochemistry of ADHD, all that. They said, "Hey, we don't know how to say this nicely, so we're just going to say it. Nobody cares."
Mm,
What they've never seen before is somebody sit with a wife who just blew their marriage up compassionately and then walk with her as she figures out what she's going to do next, or a husband
right,
who blew his world up. And so it's less about me trying to, you know, like have this sixth sense and more it's just about, I think the world out there is so flooded with information. What they don't have is an actual path to sit in their homes and say, okay, here's the reality of our home. What do we do now? And
right.
that's become the magic, I think.
Yeah, there's lots of noise out there. So
Oh,
thank you.
much noise. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for creating content that matters and that really is filling a need for sure.
Thank you.
Well, as we turn our attention to today's focus, which is signs of toxic relationships, I want to unpack this together, John, with our listeners as well. While this is a podcast, Love That Lasts is dedicated to pursuing love that is shaped as a follower of Jesus. We do have to talk about those difficult parts of relationship life. And sometimes that means dealing with things that involve unhealthy relationships. So today, that's really where I want to focus and get our listeners to be a part of this conversation that they are getting to hear between you and me. Because I think we need to be aware, we need to be talking about signs and signals that can indicate that a relationship isn't loving, that it's unhealthy or possibly toxic. And, as I work in this space, do private practice and therapy, man, just like you see countless individuals who have found themselves in unhealthy and unloving relationships. And definitely these kind of relationships take a toll. So I'm hoping today that through our conversation, we can provide some education, some awareness to relationship well being. And that's really what our focus is today. So, as we get started, John, let's kind of now just give a little context around toxic relationships. Give us your perspective on how you define a toxic relationship.
It's actually morphed over the last year in a pretty dramatic fashion. Um, I'll frame it up this way. I'm a big believer that most of the time our bodies are right. And what we do often, and especially in this world so full of noise, is we go chasing symptoms. I'm not sleeping. I feel anxious. My body's depressing itself. And what I want to call people back to is this idea that this question is, what if your body's right? And
Mm,
so if you find yourself not able to do very basic human things like sleep, right? Like go to the bathroom, like be around other people, um, then I want us to ask what in our environment isn't okay? What is our body trying to get our attention about? And often those are core relationship challenges. What's going unspoken, what's going unsaid. If I was to define like get all the way down, distill all the stuff down to how do I define a toxic relationship? I would ask you, the person hearing this question, to go to a mirror and say, am I in a relationship where I'm finding it hard for me to show up as the person I want to be? Do I
okay.
have to keep secrets? Do I have to defend myself? Are there things unsaid because it's unsafe? Obviously, if you're in an abusive situation, am I hurt, right? But am I in a relationship of any sort where I can't be the person I want to be in this world, in this home, on this couch? And I want us to reverse engineer it from there.
That's really good. I mean, just paying attention to what your body is signaling becomes really important. Sometimes when I have people in therapy and maybe, they're telling me they're really anxious about something, whether that's relationally or maybe it's going on something else, but I'll often ask them, where does that show up in your body, right?
Mhm.
Where is it showing up so that you are more aware? Because sometimes when we are dealing with relationship issues that are not healthy, our awareness, even kind of into our own selves, may be lacking a little bit, just because we may be flooded or on guard or not really taking in information that we need to be paying attention to. So I really like that piece that you're bringing up. John, you write that many people will stay in relationships where they don't feel completely safe. They may feel unheard or really drained from the relationship. Why do you think so many people struggle to recognize toxicity when they're the ones living in it?
Man, that's a complex question. It could be that you grew up in a house where your thoughts and opinions, you were told to shut your mouth. Nobody cared what you thought. Your job was to make sure everybody else was okay. And you find yourselves 15 years into a marriage and you realized, oh, I'm just repeating that same pattern of I need to be quiet. My feelings don't matter. What's real? I'm gonna outsource what I know to be real to my partner here. Um, I also think there's some true, and we blow over this, especially in faith-based communities, there's a true cost to choosing reality, if you will, in the state of your relationship. Um, there's true economic costs to getting out of an abusive relationship. There's true
Mm,
safety costs. There's true legal situations, right? And so sometimes people actually do. I used to think people were unaware. The more I've sat with people, like a lot of people know, like, no, I know this person's unsafe, and I'm willing to trade this unsafety for the unknown of what happens if I choose safety for me and my kids. And there's a reality there. And so I think it can be a big, broad
right.
bunch of reasons. I like to get past a lot of the reasons and really drill down to I need you to answer the question. Are you safe? Are you able to tell the truth? Do you need to keep secrets? Do you find yourselves ducking? Do you wince when somebody drives up in the driveway? Um, and if so, I always come back to that. You're worth a different kind of life than that.
Very true. Well said. part of your work is even providing some content through Ramsey Solutions website. And one of those pieces that you wrote is entitled 14 Signs You're in a Toxic Relationship. And listeners can find that on the Ramsey Solutions website. And in it, John, you write about the difference between toxic and abusive relationships. And you say that it's important not to confuse toxic with abusive. Abuse is an extreme form of toxicity, and it should never be tolerated by anyone for any reason or for any amount of time. So I just want to point out, based on that great advice that you are giving and distinction being made, if any of our listeners that are tuning in here today or anyone you know is trapped in an abusive relationship, please reach out for help. And that may even involve contacting the police. You can also call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, because everyone deserves to be safe and to be loved. And so I thank you for also voicing that, John.
Excellent.
Let's turn our attention a little bit to culture, because we live in a culture where I think it's pretty evident that we get a lot of messages around this idea of follow your heart and trust your feelings and fall in love. Now, listen, John, I'm gonna be honest here and with our listeners. I am all for love. I love love, but I'm not a big fan of this idea of falling in love, because it's the falling part that I think it creates a problem. The posture of falling is not great, right? Because, if our phone falls off the cabinet or we trip and fall and, bust open our chin, that's not a good presentation. But yet we kind of buy into this belief of falling in love and just follow your heart. And I'm curious, from your experience, John, how can attraction and maybe even chemistry sometimes blind people to serious red flags that may be popping up in a relationship?
Oh man, I feel like you just stacked up like four of my soapboxes and to climb up
Pre-
here.
Preach on. Let's go.
Here's the dumbest thing. The dumbest thing, Heidi, is we have this centuries old story, and feel free to edit this out if I say this too crass. This centuries old story of two horny teenagers who fell in love and got married by some rogue priest, and then they die in a quasi murder suicide called Romeo and Juliet. We call that star-crossed. That is the pinnacle of romance in our culture. And anything short of that is seen as not following your heart, not following. It's madness. It is
Mm,
madness. I grew up, dude, I'm embarrassed to say this. I think it's the first time I'm going to ever say this publicly. I personally saw Titanic 3 times in the movie theater.
really?
One time I saw it alone. I was so captivated by that. I saw Good Will Hunting like 40 times in the theater. This idea of I got to go see about a girl, like I'm gonna see somebody and I'm gonna know, and it's just game over. I think it's damaging at a level that most of us haven't metabolized yet. That I
Mm,
say like you fall in love like it's a hole, but I think the worst part of that story is the idea that love happens to you. Instead,
right.
love is an action that you take every single morning when you're tired, when you're bored, when you're annoyed, when you have 3 kids under the age of 5. It's love is a thing you do over and over and over again. And the way I write about it is my grandparents were married 73 years, I think, 73 and a half years. And when my granddad passed away, my grandmother lost a lung in a part of her heart. Like they were
Mm,
soulmates, but in the rearview mirror. You do life long enough together and you become one. In fact, I've officiated weddings where I say like you two are now one. I wish I could take that back. You're not. You are two individual people who are slow on a slow path together where 20, 30, 50 years down the road you're going to be you'll be united in a way that you can't possibly imagine when you're 26 or 36.
right.
And so I think the whole cultural um, cocktail that we drink has just poisoned relationships because it gives rise to this insidious things like relationships just run their course. That's
Mm,
not a thing. One or both of you stops hitting the gas. One or both of you stops trying. They
right.
just run out of gas, right? So I think it's madness. Arthur Brooks, who's become a great buddy of mine, he talks a lot about the neurochemistry, especially initially with attraction, and how it actually falls off a cliff into this what he calls like a depression in your body that you slowly rebuild over time. I think we're playing with a cocktail of neurochemistry, we're playing with a cocktail of cultural messaging, and you can't just swipe off the neurochemistry. But man, if we could divorce ourselves from the cultural noise and say, I choose you, and that doesn't mean I choose you once. That means I'm going to choose you every day till death do us part. What that does for all of us is it takes our marriage or any relationship out of a thing that's happening to us and
Right.
puts us back in the driver's seat of our own life. When Sheila and I, when we sat across the table from us, and we were having the conversation we were having is, are we done? The marriage we have is over. Do we want to build something new? I had two kids running around. I had a dog walking around. Like, is this over? I think it was her that said it, and I'll credit her because she usually says the wiser stuff in our house.
Mm.
At some point, 4 hours into that conversation, when we're both laugh, crying, sad, mad, all the stuff, she said, "Well, it seems like we've built a pretty bad marriage. I guess we could build something great."
Mm.
That was the light bulb that was like, oh yeah, we get to decide this. And the
Right.
moment you own, oh, we get to choose what happens tomorrow, man, that does away with all that cultural madness of this just happens to you, it's just run its course. You fell
Right.
into this thing so you can fall out of it. Man, I get to choose what tomorrow looks like and hope to God my spouse chooses that same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. And I think about this from a faith perspective, because when our culture gives us this message that, fall in love, kind of just go with your feelings. Feelings are great, but like you just said,
They
there is
lie. They don't tell you
yeah,
the truth.
you got to use more than that, right? You got to
Right.
package it with other stuff. And I kind of see from my perspective that a lot of the versions of love in our larger culture is really about self. I love what love
Uh,
does for me, right? Not what it can do for you. But that's why I love, 1 Corinthians 13. Actually, Jason read this when he asked me to marry him. And
Gross.
yeah, I
Gross.
know, kind of, yeah, cheesy. But, here's the thing. Even then, as that 21-year-old girl, I didn't understand all what that really meant. But that has been such a reference point for us to go back to because what it says is about love is much more than feeling. It's all of these actions that often we can use to help us look at love. And so, from that perspective of red flags for anyone listening, if we are seeing love really more for the person loving or trying to pursue the relationship just for self, and it's actually become something that is pretty narcissistic, that should be a pretty big red flag, right? Because
Absolutely.
we got to see some actions that are really catering towards loving other people well.
Yeah, man, you said some important things here. So, for all of human history, until give or take 200 years ago, marriage was for one thing, and that was to not die, right?
Mm.
It was,
Yeah,
if I marry you, we get all of our cousins and all of our extended family, and there's a better chance we're not going to die.
right.
In the last 200 years, we've solved for so many things like water, and you and I can push a button on our phone, and some kid on a unicycle will show up to our door with a sandwich, right? Like we've solved for so many things, and over the last 100 years, but especially that's 50 years, marriage has become a what about me? And I'll add a twist to what you just said. Will Guidara is wrote a book called Unreasonable Hospitality, which is a masterpiece. He was a restaurateur in New York. Him and I were meeting, we were just chit-chatting backstage one time, and he said something that has stuck with me forever. In New York, at these fancy restaurants, like I'm kind of an Arby's guy, but at these super atomic restaurants, being a waiter there is a career, a really
Right.
career. And these guys, these men and women are charming, and that's what they do, right? And he said one of the hardest things for him as a restaurant owner was to remind them that the first thing you do when you start your shift is you head all the way back in the kitchen and fill your pitcher up so that you can spend your entire evening serving people well.
Hmm.
So in a weird way, the greatest thing I can do for my wife of 24 years is I got to make sure I'm okay. I got to go fill up my pitcher so that I can spend every minute of the rest of the day giving myself away to her. And
Mm.
that means I gotta do the things I gotta do. I gotta exercise. I gotta go see a therapist. I gotta do the stuff I need to do so that I can show up. And man, I'll stop there because I don't want to go down a faith-based
No,
hole, but
yeah.
we've messed that up a little bit, I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually, on a previous episode that we had, we talked about this idea of healthy me, healthy we.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
an
yeah.
importance of what we bring into the relationship and how we nurture and take care of ourselves. That's not selfish.
No.
That's very important. It's life-giving to the person, but it also is important for the relationship. Well, let's move on. One of the signs that you mention around toxic relationships is people kind of walking on eggshells. And sometimes people think, well, maybe that's just kind of a normal part of relationship life. How might you help people distinguish between maybe normal conflict and a relationship where they're more constantly kind of managing another person's emotions?
Yeah, man, that's messy. The eggshell thing was for me. I realized I was doing that inside my own house, my house, and I don't want to overgender this, but I hear this that often women find their homes become guilt factories and men become failure factories. And
Mm,
for me, what I learned very quickly was I don't know how to do any of this right, especially when we had our first son. Everything I did, I remember the first time my wife was exhausted. I mean, we were home from the hospital for 3 days or 4 days. I thought I'm going to be hero dad, modern cool dad. I did all the laundry. And the first question my wife asked was, what soap did I use? I didn't know there was a different soap for this and for that.
mm,
Like, I was so proud of myself for just having like sprayed water on them, right? I learned really quickly this isn't a good place for me. So I started walking on eggshells in my own home. And what that meant was that was not my safe, that wasn't a safe place. That wasn't a place of peace for me. That was yet another performance that I had to go put on a costume and sing and dance for. And what that became exhausting. And you know where I got celebrated was work. I got celebrated running around with police officers. And so what happened in very tiny steps, I ended up further away from my home. And so conflict where you're not safe, and I'm talking about emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, um, that's not walking on eggshells. That's walking duck and cover, right? But if you find
right.
yourself where you can't show up as your full self in your home, I did a study, a white space study here a few years ago. 8 out of 10 married couples said that their spouse didn't truly know them. They don't know
Mm,
what they're worried about. They don't know about their faith struggles. They don't know that they are grossed out when they see themselves in the mirror. They don't know. I'll tell you a funny thing. A few years ago, I take a retreat every year just with myself, just to say like, hey, how are you doing, man? As a dad, as a husband, these important things. And one of the questions or one of the aha moments I had was, I don't know this woman I'm married to like I used to. I don't
mm,
know what podcast she's listening to. I don't know what book she's listening to. I don't know what even music she's listening to these days. We were just churning. We were great co-managers of our house, and so I asked her, we're both old professors, so I said, "Hey, make me a syllabus of you. Like,
mm.
give me 10 books you've read over the last few years that mean something to you, podcast, and I want to listen to them and read them. And that way we'll be able to talk about them at dinner, right?" 1 month went by, 2 months went by, and I remember thinking, oh, I haven't got that syllabus yet. So I texted her and she said, I was hoping you forgot.
Uh,
I texted her back, why? And she said, and it stuck with me, and this was both of us, right? I'm afraid if you really know these things, you won't like me anymore. And this
huh.
is somebody I've been married to at the time for 21, 22 years. And A, I'd stopped trying to get to see and know my wife, and she'd stop letting herself be seen and known. And instead of
Mhm.
creating this secret world together, we each created our own little secret world. And so she made it for me. I listened to some of these podcasts, and by the way, Heidi, they were terrible. I didn't like any of them, right? And I read some of her books. Some of the books were amazing. Some were like I didn't get them, but they gave us great. I got insight into this amazing woman I'm married to, and vice versa, right? And so I think it's continuing to pursue and see and know each other. If you don't feel like you can be known in your own home, that's that eggshell idea. Ask yourself in the mirror, am I not letting myself be known, or is being known in my house an unsafe place? Can you not tell
Mm.
your spouse who you voted for? If you can't, y'all need to have that conversation because there's deeper fissures in your marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very well said. Because when we can't be ourselves, when we can't be willing to be vulnerable, we really don't allow love to grow even,
That's
right?
right.
And if the environment of the relationship doesn't feel emotionally safe, how does love prosper in that
You
type of
can't. You can't.
situation?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
you're
but but
right.
you're always tilling one kind of soil. You're either tilling the soil for this new season or you're tilling the soil of resentment.
Yeah,
You can't show up at your house long enough as yourself. You're gonna like a line I always throw out is if you're not fully celebrated by your spouse, somebody or somebody else will celebrate you. And
yes,
so you are tilling that ground of resentment. And by the way, showing up quote unquote as your full self does not mean be a jerk or an idiot or like disrespectful. Like, right, that doesn't mean you get to be a moron, but that does mean you get to tell the truth in your house, right?
absolutely. Well said. You've also spent many years, John, helping people navigate some of the trauma around relationships. Why do you think this is just kind of one part of this, but why do you sometimes see people repeatedly engaging in relationships with partners who are emotionally unavailable, controlling, or unhealthy? Maybe the name changes, but the same pattern of how they're being treated keeps showing up, and they kind of find themselves in those type of relationships repeatedly. Why do you think that kind of happens for some?
I mean, it's one of the great truisms of marriage therapy, which is you marry your unfinished business, right?
Mm,
Um, Biologically, your body's always searching for homeostasis, and that's just a dorky way of saying you gravitate towards what your body knows, even if what it knew was unsafe, was broke your heart, made you sad growing up. Your body will gravitate towards this. This feels known, right?
exactly.
And you'll end up in those same cycles. And by the way, I'm glad you called that out. You may grow up in the home of an alcoholic and say, I'm never going to be around somebody who drinks. And then you end up marrying somebody who works 125 hours a week. It's the same pathology. It's just in our culture, we send you to rehab for drinking and we pat you on the back and give you a raise for being addicted to your work or whatever, right? But it's catching yourself, and instead of just following what quote unquote feels right, it's asking yourself, what kind of home do I want to have? Sheila asked a powerful question years ago, and it's become our guiding light here. What do we want our home to feel like when I drive up, when she comes
Right.
home? What do we want this place to feel like? We get to decide that. We get to choose it, and then we have to reverse engineer that feeling with actual action. But I think it's just as simple as your body. When her dad, one day, her dad was a rodeo guy, was an elementary school teacher, and a pro bass fisherman.
Wow.
Am as
What a mix.
yeah, right. But here I am as a failed punk rock singer with I wanted to be so bad. And now I'm the dean of students somewhere. It wasn't until her dad sent me all of his old records from his college years that I was like, oh no, we're the same guy, right?
Yeah.
My wife literally married the same guy, just in a different outfit, right? And with
Mm,
different outlets for our same patterns. And I did too, right? So it's really understanding my body's just doing what feels known, and I get to choose what happens next.
yeah, I love that. I love kind of exploring with people your family of origin, what has kind of shaped you. And there's many things in life that shape us and how we do relationships, but your family can definitely be one of those places. And I like to talk to people about how the past can function in the present. And maybe some of those tendencies that we are trying to finish from our past may show up. Here's the thing, things that happened in our past, especially with our family of origin, we had little control over when we were young. But we get to choose how we're going to respond and what kind of
Yes,
relationships we want to
yes.
have with other people, right? And so I think being more aware, go back to that awareness piece again, being more aware of the things that have been shaping in my life that may make me a little vulnerable, right? To where how I'm choosing a relationship, how I am even engaging in that relationship. And to our listeners is to help you to realize is that even when there has been some things in your past or you have seen repeated themes of unhealthy relationships, that does not have to continue. You
Yeah.
can choose a different path. You might need some help with
Yes.
that, but that's
Oh,
okay.
you probably will.
Yeah.
I want people who are listening to this to metabolize how countercultural that is.
Right.
What I have found, and again, I consider myself a card-carrying member of this community. I do think the mental health community over the last 100 years has done a disservice with all of the tagging and labeling and calling out at tinier and tinier slivers. It's become very disempowering, saying you have this thing.
Yes.
You it
Like a
becomes
stigma.
it becomes an identity. And so it
Hmm.
often is abrupt when I tell people, hey, you get to be triggered on a thing twice, and then it's your responsibility. The first time your body is just like, we gotta duck and cover here, we gotta fight, or we gotta get out of here. The second one catches you off guard. After that, it's your responsibility to not spend your life triggered. It's not somebody else's. I got to go sit with a therapist and say, or a coach, somebody, and say,
Right.
my body keeps trying to go to war over this deal. And that is should be the most empowering thing we hear, not this disempowering message, which is, hey, you've got this thing happened to you. I'm just going to pat you on the head. You go to the corner, we'll clear the deck for you. Because that's not how the world works. And
Right.
yeah, getting in the driver's seat of your own life is so important.
Yeah, well said. I love that. It's such an important message for people is empowerment and not to see this as weakness. The reality is we're all dealing with something. And
Yeah.
none of us needs to kind of hide behind some notion that we're not. And
Right.
not to be afraid that if we are struggling and we are needing some coaching or some therapy, that's actually working from a place of strength. That's helping you to be a better you. And you're
Yeah.
worth it. Absolutely. I want to ask you along the lines of, just some non-negotiables that would kind of define healthy relationships. Just for our listeners, when you think about what might be a few characteristics of a healthy relationship that would be really good to keep right in front of you as you are trying to build a healthy, lasting love. What do you think
Uh,
about that?
I think the no relationship can survive without the anchor points of safety and trust. And so if I can't trust you, I think especially in faith-based circles, trust immediately calls up like relational fidelity. Are you going to cheat on me? Trust is way, way deeper than that. Safety is obviously, can I tell you the truth and not get sacrificed on that altar? Am I physically safe? Am I sexually safe? Right? When it comes to trust, that is, can I trust you with our money? Can I trust you with my past? Can I trust you with the things that I'm scared about? Can I be honest with you and you'll hold those things and you won't weaponize them against me? So if you don't have those two things, whatever facade and theatrical performance you're making your relationship into, the center can't hold. So
Hmm.
those two are non-negotiables. As we get further along, I always want to go back to, can you just be your weird, goofy self?
Hmm.
Can you like that? My wife and I can't tell you how different I would prefer to be in a mosh pit somewhere, in the woods somewhere. I'm a public figure for a living. My wife would prefer to be go to bed at 5 o'clock in the evening and get up at 4 and go work in her gardens. She's a writer. We could not like more different things, but the
Hmm.
things that we love, I love how much she loves her gardens. She loves how much I love. I live right by a comedy club here, and I basically live there now. She calls him my dealer. She loves that I love doing stand up with these guys. She does not think I'm funny. We don't share. We share almost no passions together, but we're passionate about how passionate each other is about them.
Hmm.
And so if
Yeah.
you can't show up and have somebody celebrate you, again, you'll begin to seek it other places, whether you want to or not. And so those are some of my non-negotiables.
I
Interesting.
love
What did I
that.
put down in that article?
What's that?
I wrote that article so long ago. What did I put down in there?
Ooh, I don't remember. I don't
Okay. All
remember.
right.
But
Good.
let's go with what you got.
All right. Excellent.
We'll take them for sure. Absolutely. So John, I know we are about out of time, but as we kind of move this around, again, for our listeners thinking about whether they're dating, whether they're maybe in a serious relationship, maybe they're getting married or have been married for many years, helping people to really think about how to build a love that truly lasts and to identify in relationships, maybe when something is not that healthy and potentially toxic, and how to move that forward. I want to ask you, just as we get ready to wrap up today, what might be just some words of encouragement to our listeners out there?
Um, I'm going to give you a word of discouragement and a word of encouragement. Is that cool?
Okay, go for it.
A word of discouragement. It might be a word of encouragement. Remember this, behavior is a language. And often I have, not often, almost all the time, I have couples saying, hey, my spouse keeps doing this, or the person I'm dating keeps doing that. And I'll often ask, if behavior is a language, what are they telling you? And
Mm,
there's almost always a long pause, like, oh, they don't love me. Or they're more invested in their golf game or in their master's degree than they are in us having time together, right? And so if behavior is a language, what is your spouse telling you? And also, I hear often, he never says this or she doesn't say that. And I'll ask, okay, if behavior is a language, do they love you? And they'll be like, yeah.
mm,
It's your job to come say, hey, here's how I would love for you to say, um, to celebrate me. Here's how I would love for you to tell me what I mean to you. It was embarrassing to me as a 6'2", 200-pound Texas male to tell my wife, hey, it would really mean the world to me if you would just say the words, I'm proud of you. And she was like, what? My whole life is built on I'm proud of you. And I was like, I know, but you
mm.
never said it.
Do you
And
want to hear it? Yeah.
yeah. Would you grab my face every once in a while and just say, I'm proud of you? Because all of this is for you, right? It's sometimes, and I was embarrassed and she couldn't read my mind and yada. You gotta say it. So a word of encouragement is this. Um, outside of a very few abusive situations, I believe in redemption
Mm,
all the way down the core. And you and your spouse can build whatever marriage you want if y'all both get out of your own individual boats and get in the same boat and ask yourselves, where do we want to row to? And what do we want this thing to feel like while we're rowing? And sometimes one of you will row way more than the other. And sometimes you'll be perfectly in sync. And sometimes y'all both just throw your paddles in the water and cross your arms. But like, you can get there if you both put the work in. I am
mm,
a big believer in I think it's Esther Perel that says most adults will be married, will have three or four great loves in their lifetime, and if they work really hard, it can be with the same person. I
yeah.
think I'm on version 9 or 10 of me. Thank God, right? You knew me when I was young. I was an idiot. And so that also applies to your marriage. Me and my wife are on marriage 14.0 right now, and we've never been married about to be a junior in high school and about to be a fifth grader. So our marriage is new, right?
Mhm.
And so we get to decide what this new marriage is going to look like. And next year, when we're getting ready for college, we've never been married with a kid going to college. And so our marriage will be new again.
Right.
And so we get to decide what this thing looks like, and all of us um, can circle back up and say, "Hey, our old marriage is over. I'm in to build a new one if you are."
Mm.
And there's no stopping us moving forward there.
That's wonderful. I love what you said there. That word redemption, because for our listeners, who are taking this in, that maybe they've lost some hope. They don't know if things can change. I too have seen people, I'm always an optimist by heart, not kind of in a just like frivolous way, but I want people to see good and see hope and possibilities for change. But you got to want it. But I know from just working with couples for several decades now, there have been some situations that honestly, I didn't say it out loud, but I'm like, I don't know that this one's going to last. But I have seen some couples come in with some really difficult parts of their story, unhealthy parts, but they have rolled up their sleeves. They've said, I want to fight for this. There's had to be some forgiveness, some real effort, some resourcing. And especially I've seen for people related to kind of their faith walk is going beyond themselves. And in that process, there have been some beautiful redemptive stories to come out of that. So I'm really glad you left that with our listeners to always realize that even when something is not healthy, the chance for it to move to a beautiful love is certainly there. That's great. Well, John, what a great conversation today. I think our listeners are going to be able to take so many things from what has been shared today. And so, for our listeners, if you're coming in, possibly dealing with a toxic or unhealthy relationship, or maybe you're listening to this and you're concerned about a friend or a loved one in a relationship, my hope is that today's episode has brought some things to light, but also given you some encouragement that no one deserves to be in a relationship that is hurtful and unloving. And I hope today we have given you some opportunity to explore some things related to toxic relationships and how to move to healthier ones. Beautiful love is sacrificial, and it is something about looking to bring good into the life of another. So, my hope is that we will pursue beautiful love and grow a love that lasts. So, John, thank you, my friend. You're wonderful. Your stories are wonderful. Your work is wonderful. And my prayer is that you will continue to keep touching people's lives and help them to continue to grow in all areas.
Thank you for being my friend all these years. Take care.
My pleasure. All right. Until next time,